The rain had been falling since before dawn, slow and stubborn, turning the dirt road into a ribbon of thick brown mud that clung to boots and wheels alike. It was the kind of rain that didn't shout but lingered, settling deep into the land as if it meant to stay. By the time she reached the old wooden gate, her dress was damp at the hem, her shoes heavy, and her strength nearly gone. She paused there, one hand gripping the rough timber, catching her breath as she looked past the fence. The farm stretched out in quiet patches of green and gray, worn but standing. A weathered barn leaned slightly to one side, its roof patched with mismatched tin sheets. Beyond it sat a small house, smoke barely rising from its chimney. Everything about the place spoke of survival, not comfort. She adjusted the strap of the cloth bag on her shoulder. It wasn't heavy, but after miles of walking, even the smallest weight felt like a burden. There wasn't much inside anyway. A spare dress, a piece of bread wrapped in cloth, and a past she could not return to. The sound of boots against wet earth made her stiffen. He appeared from the side of the barn, moving with the slow, steady pace of someone used to hard ground and harder days. His hat was pulled low, his shirt damp from the rain, and his sleeves rolled up past his elbows. There was nothing soft about him, not in the way he walked or the way he looked at the world. When his eyes settled on her, they held caution first, not kindness. They studied each other across the gate. She swallowed, her fingers tightening around the wood. She had practiced the words in her mind over and over during the long walk, but now they felt stuck somewhere between her chest and throat. "I can work," she said finally, her voice quieter than she meant it to be. She cleared her throat and tried again, stronger this time. "I can cook, clean, tend to animals. I'll do whatever's needed." He didn't respond right away. His gaze dropped briefly to her worn shoes, then to the bag at her side, then back to her face, measuring, weighing, deciding. The rain tapped softly against the barn roof. She took a small step closer to the gate. "I just need a place to stay," she added. "The barn would be enough." That seemed to catch his attention. One eyebrow lifted slightly, though his expression stayed guarded. "The barn?" he repeated as if testing the idea. "Yes," she said quickly. "I don't need much, just a roof. I won't be trouble." A faint breeze moved through the yard, carrying the scent of wet hay and soil. Somewhere in the distance, a horse shifted in its stall, the sound echoing faintly. He rested one hand on the top rail of the gate, his fingers rough and still. Up close, the lines on his face were clearer, carved deep by sun and years. There was something else there, too, something quieter. Loss, maybe. The kind that doesn't leave all at once but settles in slowly, like the rain. "You alone?" he asked. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Yes." The word felt heavier than it should have. His gaze lingered on her a moment longer, as if searching for something unspoken. Then he looked past her down the empty road she had come from. There was nothing there but mud and mist. "Not many folks come this way without a reason," he said. She didn't answer that. Some things were better left unsaid, at least for now. Another stretch of silence settled between them. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't entirely cold either, just uncertain. Finally, he pushed the gate open halfway, the hinges creaking in protest. It wasn't an invitation, not fully, but it wasn't a refusal either. "You ever worked a farm before?" he asked. "A little," she said. "Enough to learn more." That earned the faintest hint of a nod. He stepped back, leaving space for her to enter, though his eyes never left her. "Work starts before sunup," he said, "and it doesn't end early." "I understand. And I don't keep anyone who can't pull their weight." "I won't be a burden," she replied, her voice steady now despite the pounding of her heart. For a moment it seemed like he might say something more. Instead, he turned slightly toward the barn, then stopped as if remembering something. "There are rules," he said, his tone shifting just enough to make her uneasy. "You follow them, you stay. You don't, you leave. No questions." She nodded quickly. "Of course." But he didn't move. The rain began to fall a little harder, tapping against the wood, soaking into the ground already thick with mud. The air felt heavier, charged with something she couldn't quite name. He looked at her again, longer this time, his expression harder to read. "You can stay in the barn," he said at last. Relief rushed through her so suddenly it almost made her weak. She stepped forward, crossing the gate, her boots sinking slightly into the mud of the yard. But just as she passed him, he spoke again, his voice lower now. "Just know this," he added. "Everyone who's come asking the same thing had a reason they didn't want found." Her step slowed. "And reasons," he continued, "have a way of catching up." She didn't turn around. She couldn't because deep down she knew he was right. She kept walking, though his words pressed against her back like a cold wind. The yard felt larger from the inside, quieter too, as if every sound had been swallowed by the rain. Her boots sank deeper with each step, making a soft pulling noise as she moved toward the barn. She didn't look back at him, not yet. Something told her that if she did, she might lose the small bit of ground she had gained. The barn door stood half open, creaking gently as it shifted in the breeze. Inside, the smell of hay and wood wrapped around her, dry and warm compared to the damp outside. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. That alone felt like more than she had known in days. She set her bag down near a stack of old hay bales and let out a slow breath. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to steady them. It had been a long road to get here, longer than she ever planned. Roads like that change a person, wearing them down in ways that don't always show on the outside. Behind her, she heard his boots again. He stopped just inside the doorway, not stepping too close. It was as if he was keeping a line between them, one that neither of them had agreed on but both understood. "There's a bucket by the well," he said. "Water's clean. You'll need it." She nodded, glancing briefly over her shoulder. Up close, his presence felt heavier, not threatening, but watchful, like he was always expecting something to go wrong. "I'll fetch it," she said. He didn't move right away. "You eat yet?" The question caught her off guard. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Not since yesterday." His jaw tightened slightly, though he didn't say anything about it. After a moment, he reached into a small sack he carried and pulled out a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. He held it out toward her, not meeting her eyes this time. "Take it," he said. "It's not much." She stepped closer, careful, and took it from his hand. "Thank you." Their fingers didn't touch, but they came close enough that she noticed the roughness of his skin. He pulled his hand back quickly as if the moment had gone on too long. "There's a lantern over there," he added, nodding toward a wooden shelf. "Nights get dark out here." "I'll manage," she said quietly. He gave a small nod, then turned to leave, but paused again at the doorway. "Sun up," he reminded her. "We start then." "I'll be ready." He stepped out into the rain without another word, leaving her alone with the soft rustle of hay and the steady drum of water on the roof. She waited until his footsteps faded before sinking down onto the hay bale. The bread in her hands felt heavier than it should. She unwrapped it slowly and took a small bite, forcing herself to eat, even though her stomach had tightened with nerves. This place was better than the road, better than the nights spent under trees listening to every sound like it might be danger, but it wasn't safe. Not truly. She could feel that already. She looked around this barn more carefully now. Old tools hung on the walls, worn from use but kept in order. A few stalls stood empty, though one held a quiet horse that lifted its head slightly, watching her with calm, dark eyes. Everything had its place here. Nothing was wasted. That meant he noticed things. She swallowed hard and looked down at her hands. There were marks there she couldn't explain away with simple work, faint but still there. She curled her fingers inward, hiding them from view even though no one was watching. Outside, the rain began to slow, the steady fall turning into a light patter. Her thoughts drifted back despite herself. A different road, a different place. The sound of raised voices that never quite faded. The feeling of a door closing behind her for the last time. She had told herself she wouldn't think about it anymore, that starting over meant leaving everything behind. But memories don't follow rules like that. She stood suddenly, pushing the thoughts away, and walked toward the barn door. The sky had begun to clear slightly, though clouds still hung low over the fields. In the distance, she could see him moving near the fence line, checking something along the posts. For a moment, she studied him. There was something about the way he worked, steady and quiet, that made it hard to place him. He didn't seem like a man who talked much, but not because he had nothing to say. More like he had learned that words didn't always change anything. She wondered how long he had been alone out here, and why. Her gaze shifted to the house beyond the barn. The windows were dark, the door closed, no sign of anyone else. Yet something about it felt lived in, like the past hadn't fully let go. She stepped back inside and reached for the bucket he had mentioned. If she was going to stay even for a little while, she would need to prove herself. Work was the only thing that mattered here, work in silence. As she moved toward the well, the mud clinging to her boots again, she felt that same uneasy pull in her chest. He had said everyone came here with a reason. What he hadn't said was whether anyone had ever managed to leave with their past still behind them. And as she lowered the bucket into the dark well, listening to the faint echo of water below, she couldn't shake the feeling that this place held more than just hard work and quiet days. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the farm looked different. The rain had washed the dust away, leaving everything sharp and clear, but not softer. The ground was still heavy with mud, and the air carried a chill that settled deep in the bones. She had barely slept, waking at every small sound, unsure of where she was for a few seconds each time. She was already outside when he stepped out of the house. The bucket sat full beside the well, and she had tried to tidy the barn as best as she could in the dim lantern light. It was not much, but it was something, he noticed. His eyes moved from the swept floor near the stalls to the neatly stacked tools she had found leaning out of place. He didn't say anything right away, but there was a small shift in his posture. Not trust, not yet, just less doubt. "You start with the fence line," he said, nodding toward the far end of the field. Storm knocked a few posts loose. "Masi. Must my. She gave a quick nod and picked up the tools he pointed to. The wood was rough against her palms, familiar enough to guide her movements even after time away. The silence stretched between them as the morning passed, filled only by the sounds of hammering, shifting earth and distant animal calls. Every so often she could feel his gaze on her, quick and careful, like he was checking for something she might reveal without meaning to. She kept her focus on the task. But it wasn't just his watchfulness that made her uneasy. It was the land itself. There was a strange stillness beyond the fields, especially toward the tree line that bordered the far side of the property. The woods stood thick and dark even in daylight, their shadows deeper than they should be. Once or twice she thought she saw movement there, but when she looked again, there was nothing. "Don't go near those woods," he said suddenly. She turned, startled, not realizing she had been staring. He stood a few feet away, one hand resting on a fence post, his expression hard again. "I wasn't," she said. His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. "Good. No reason to." There was something in his tone that made it clear the matter wasn't open for discussion. She nodded and went back to work, but the warning settled heavily in her mind. Places like this always had boundaries, spoken or not, and crossing them usually came with a cost. By midday, her arms ached and her hands were raw, but she didn't slow down. Every swing of the hammer felt like proof that she belonged here, at least for now. He worked nearby, fixing a broken section of the gate. At one point, a loose board slipped from her grip, hitting the ground with a dull thud. He looked up quickly. "You all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," she said, bending to pick it up. But as she straightened, her sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal the faint marks on her wrist. It was only for a second. Still, it was enough. His expression changed, not sharply, but enough for her to notice. His gaze dropped to her wrist, then lifted back to her face. She quickly adjusted her sleeve, her movements too fast to seem casual. "Old injury?" she said before he could ask. He didn't respond right away. The air between them shifted again, tighter this time. "Doesn't look like farm work," he said quietly. Her grip tightened on the board. It healed. That's not what I asked. She met his eyes then, holding his gaze even though her chest felt tight. It's in the past. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he looked away first. Past has a way of walking back in, he muttered. The words stayed with her long after. They finished the fence in silence. As the day stretched toward evening, clouds began to gather again, dark and low on the horizon. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it a distant sound that made her pause. It was faint, almost easy to miss, but it didn't belong to the farm. She turned her head, listening more carefully. It sounded like wheels against rough ground, slow, heavy. Someone was coming. He heard it too. His body went still, his attention shifting toward the road beyond the fields. The guarded look returned instantly. Inside, he said, his voice low but firm. She hesitated. Who is it? Inside, he repeated. There was no room for argument. She stepped back toward the barn, her heart beginning to race again. From the corner of her eye, she saw him move toward the gate, his posture tense, ready. The sound grew louder now, wheels, hooves, and something else beneath it. She slipped into the barn but stayed close to the door just enough to see without being seen. The yard, which had felt quiet all day, now seemed exposed. A wagon came into view through the thinning mist. Two figures sat at the front, their shapes blurred at first, then slowly sharpening as they drew closer. One of them held the reins, the other scanning the land as if searching for someone. Her breath caught. Without meaning to, her hand moved to her sleeve, gripping the fabric tightly. Out by the gate he stood waiting, still silent. The wagon rolled closer, the wheels grinding against the damp road. And for the first time since she arrived, she felt it clearly. Whatever she had run from had not been left behind. It had followed her here. The wagon rolled to a slow stop just outside the gate, the horses snorting softly as they settled. The sound seemed too loud in the stillness of the farm. Even the wind had quieted, as if the land itself was waiting. From where she stood inside the barn, she could see them clearly now. Two men, both dressed in travel-worn coats, their faces marked by long days on the road. One of them climbed down first, his boots sinking slightly into the mud. The other stayed seated, watching. Her chest tightened. She knew that kind of watching. Out by the gate, he didn't move to open it. His hand rested on the wood, steady but firm as he faced them without a word. "We're looking for someone," the man on the ground said. "No one here but me," he replied. The answer came too quickly, too clean. Inside the barn, her fingers curled into the edge of the door. She knew he was lying, and now so did they. The man took a few steps closer to the gate, his eyes scanning the property with quiet patience. He looked at the house, then the barn, then back at the farmer. "Woman," he said, "traveling alone, passed through towns not far from here." Silence followed. She could feel her heart beat in her throat. Out in the yard, the farmer's expression didn't change. "Plenty of roads around here," he said. "People pass through all the time." "Not like this one," the man replied. The second man finally climbed down from the wagon. He moved slower, but there was a sharpness in the way his gaze shifted, like he was piecing things together. "She's been asking for work," the second man added. "Anywhere she can stay." That detail hung in the air like a weight. Inside the barn, she stepped back slightly, her breath shallow. They knew too much, not everything, but enough. Her eyes darted toward the back of the barn where a small side door led out toward the fields. She could run. The thought came quickly, sharp and urgent. The fields stretched wide and beyond them the woods. But his warning echoed in her on, "Don't go near those woods." "You mind if we take a look around?" the first man asked. The farmer's hand gripped the gate a little tighter. "I do." A long pause followed. "You got something to hide?" the second man asked, his tone calm but edged. The farmer didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped forward just enough to make it clear the gate wouldn't open without him. "This is my land," he said. "No reason for anyone to be walking it without cause." The first man smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. Our cause is simple. We find her, we leave. No trouble for you. Inside the barn, she pressed her back against the wall. Every word felt closer now, sharper. There was no easy way out of this. If they came inside, they would find her. If she ran, they might follow. Her gaze shifted again to the side door. The fields looked open from here, but open meant exposed. The sound of a horse shifting broke the stillness, followed by the creak of the wagon. Then the second man moved closer to the gate. We're not asking twice, he said. The air changed with that. Outside, the farmer straightened slightly. His posture was no longer just guarded, but firm in a different way. There was something in his stance now that hadn't been there before. Not just caution, but decision. Inside, she felt it too. The moment was tipping. Her hand moved instinctively to her sleeve again, gripping it tightly. She couldn't stay hidden forever, and she couldn't keep letting someone else stand between her and what she had brought with her. She closed her eyes for a brief second, steadying herself. Then she stepped forward. The barn door creaked softly as she pushed it open. All three men turned at once. The yard felt smaller now, the space between them charged and heavy. "I'm here," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The farmer's head snapped slightly toward her, something like frustration flashing across his face, not anger, something deeper, like he had already made a choice and she had just changed it. The two men at the gate studied her closely. Recognition came quickly. "There you are," the first man said, his tone almost satisfied. She took a few steps forward, stopping just short of the gate. The mud clung to her boots again, but she stood steady. "You've been looking for me," she said. "We have," the second man replied. Behind her, she could feel the farmer's presence, closer now. Not stopping her, but not stepping away either. The wind picked up again, rustling through the fields, carrying the scent of rain not far off. "This doesn't concern him," she added, glancing briefly back. "Let me handle it." But he didn't move. "Anything that steps onto this land concerns me," he said quietly. The words settled heavily between them. The first man let out a slow breath, his eyes moving between the two of them. "You don't know who you're protecting." The farmer's gaze didn't waver. "Don't need to." That answer shifted something again. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension stretched tight, ready to break. Her heart pounded as she looked from one face to another. The past she had tried to outrun stood right in front of her now, no longer distant, no longer fading. And yet, for the first time since she arrived, she wasn't standing alone. The sky darkened further as clouds gathered overhead. The storm was coming back, and this time it wouldn't pass quietly. The wind moved harder through the yard, bending the tall grass and carrying the scent of another storm. For a long moment, no one spoke. The kind of silence that comes before something breaks settled between them. She drew in a slow breath and stepped a little closer to the gate. Her hands were steady now, even though her heart still beat fast. "You followed me far enough," she said, her voice clear. "There's nothing left to take from me." The first man gave a faint shake of his head. "That's where you're wrong. You walked away without settling what you owe." "I don't owe anything," she replied. "Not anymore." The second man's eyes narrowed slightly. "You worked under contract, food, shelter, protection. You don't just disappear." Her jaw tightened. That wasn't protection. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything said before. Behind her, the farmer shifted his stance. "What she's saying sounds clear enough," he said. "Seems to me you're done here." The first man looked at him, measuring again. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand a woman asking for honest work," he replied. "And I understand when someone doesn't want to be found." The wind picked up again, rattling the loose tin on the barn roof. The horses near the wagon shifted uneasily. The second man stepped forward, closer to the gate now. "We're not leaving without her." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't just talk anymore. She felt it too, the edge of the moment. Running would only make things worse. It always had. I left because I chose to, she said firmly. I worked, I paid for what I took, and I walked away when it stopped being fair. The first man studied her, his expression less certain now. That's not how it works. Yes. It is for me, she replied. It is for me. Another silence followed, but this one felt different, less sharp, more uncertain. The farmer finally stepped up beside her, his presence no longer in the background. He rested one hand on the gate, his voice steady. You've said your piece, he told the men. Now hear mine. She stays here if she wants to. That's the end of it. The second man let out a quiet breath, glancing at his partner. There was a shift between them, something unspoken passing back and forth. This isn't worth trouble, the first man muttered under his breath. The other man hesitated, then looked at her one last time. You'll regret walking away, he said. Maybe, she answered, but it'll be my choice. That seemed to settle it. The first man turned back toward the wagon, climbing up without another word. The second followed after a moment, though slower, his gaze lingering on the farm as if memorizing it. The horses pulled forward, the wheels turning through the mud once more. The sound of the wagon faded slowly down the road, growing quieter until it was gone completely. The yard felt still again, but not the same kind of stillness as before. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her shoulders lowering slightly. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the empty road. They won't come back, the farmer said quietly. She glanced at him. How can you be sure? He shrugged lightly. Men like that don't like wasting time where they're not welcome. She studied his face, the lines there, the quiet strength in the way he carried himself. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, I did, he replied simply. My land, my say. There was something more in his Doris, but he didn't explain it, and she didn't press. The sky began to lighten slightly as the cloud shifted, the worst of the storm passing off to the side. For the first time since she arrived, the farm didn't feel like a place she was hiding in. It felt like a place she could stay. I meant what I said, she added after a moment. About working, I won't be a burden. He gave a small nod. I can see that. They stood there for a few seconds longer, the quiet between them no longer heavy. What about the rules? She asked softly. He glanced toward the barn, then back at her. Same as before. Work hard, be honest. She managed a faint smile. I can do that. He reached for the gate and pushed it open wider this time, not just halfway. Then you'd better get started, he said. Fence won't fix itself again. She let out a small breath that almost felt like a laugh, something she hadn't done in a long while. She stepped forward, back onto the yard, the mud still there but no longer holding her in place. As she moved toward the barn, she glanced once more at the road. It was empty. The past hadn't disappeared. It never really did, but it had loosened its grip just enough for her to move forward. Behind her, the farmer turned back toward his work, and the farm slowly came back to life around them. The quiet sounds of animals, tools, and wind filled the space once more. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. And sometimes that was all a person needed to begin again. Thanks for watching this story. Subscribe to Dustin Hart Western Tales for more heartfelt stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Tell me in the comments what you felt about this story and what kind of stories you want to see next. See you in the next story.